Oftentimes, we come across sliders that allow us to change input values by sliding them along a range. These sliders are known as range sliders. In this tutorial, you will learn how to create a range slider using JavaScript alone without any other libraries. The range slider will have a minimum and maximum value that users can slide across. As users slide the value, the range and tooltip value will change accordingly. As usual, let's begin this project by setting it up. First, we'll need to define the title for the project. Next, we need to create the style.css and script.js files within the root directory. After that, we'll link the style.css file inside the head tag. And finally, we'll link the script.js file just before the closing body tag. We have completed the initial setup. Now we can move on to HTML. First, we will create a heading 1 tag for the title of our range slider project. Then, we will create a div with the class double slider box that will contain all the other components needed to create the range slider. Next, we will create a div with the class price slider. We will also add a heading 3 elements to represent the minimum value that the user can select. The div with the class input wrapper will wrap our input element and tooltip. HTML provides an input type range that allows the user to select numbers from a minimum and maximum range. We will also add the class attribute with the value range slider. We can set the minimum value using the min attribute, which we will set to 100. We will set the maximum value to 5000. The input type range allows us to set both the minimum and maximum values. Lastly, we will set the value to 2500, which will be the default value when the page is loaded for the first time. We will create a div with the class tooltip to hold the value displayed when the user scrolls the range. We will also add another heading 3 tag to represent the maximum value that the user can set. We have completed the HTML for our range slider, and here is how it looks like with HTML only. Moving forward, we will now be using CSS to style the range slider. To select the font, we will be using Google Fonts and specifically the Poppins font. We will copy its embedded code and paste it into the style.css file. These CSS selectors and pseudo elements are being used for global styling purposes, with box sizing set to border box and margin and padding set to 0. Let's target the body tag to apply CSS rules to the entire web page. The height property is set to 100 VH, which ensures that the content of the web page fills the entire screen. The display property is set to flex, which allows you to use flexbox properties. The flex direction property is set to column, and the justify content property is set to center to vertically align the content in the center. The align items property is set to center, which centers the content horizontally. The background color is set to a shade of blue-gray, and the font family property is set to Poppins. Our heading 1 tag will have a font size of 2 rem, a color of white, and a font weight of 600 to give it a semi-bold appearance. Similarly, heading 3 will also have a font size of 1.5 rem, a color of white, and a font weight of 600. Our main container element with class double slider box should have a margin top of 20 px, padding of top and bottom 120 px, left and right of 40 px, border radius of 10 px, and a background color of a darker shade of blue-gray. The div element with class price slider will have a margin of 30 px on the top and bottom and 0 px on the left and right. The display property will be set to flex, which will make this element a flex container. To vertically center the content, we will set the align items property to center. Additionally, we will set the flex wrap property to wrap. To style the element with the class input wrapper, which contains our input type range and tooltip, we will set its position to relative and display to flex. The margin top and bottom will be 0, while the left and right will be set to 15 pixels. Finally, we will apply a minimum width of 300 pixels. In order to make the input element look better, we will select the input element within the input wrapper class. To remove any default browser styles, we will set WebKit appearance to none. We will set its height to 2 rem and remove the default outline by setting it to none. Similarly, we will remove the border by applying the border property to none. Finally, to make sure that the input element takes up the full width of the container, we will set the width to 100%. This CSS code is used to style the draggable handle, also called the thumb, of a range input, specifically for Firefox browsers. First, we set the mouse appearance property to none, which allows us to customize the design of the thumb. We then set the border to 1 rem with a white color and the background color to white as well. The pointer events property is set to auto, allowing users to click and drag the thumb. Cursor is set to pointer and the border radius is set to 10 px. This CSS code is used to style the draggable handle, also called the thumb, of a range input, specifically for WebKit-based browsers like Chrome and Safari. First, we set the WebKit appearance property to none, which allows us to customize the design of the thumb. We then define the width and height of the thumb to 3 rem. The border is set to 1 rem thick with a white color, and the background color is also set to white. The pointer events property is set to auto, allowing users to click and drag the thumb. The cursor is set to pointer, indicating that the thumb is clickable, and the border radius is set to 10 px. Finally, we will style the element with class tooltip. First, we will set the background color to blue and the text color to white. We will also set the border radius to 0.25 rem. Next, we will position the tooltip 120% of its containing element's height from the bottom by setting the bottom property to 120%. We will use absolute positioning to allow us to position the tooltip relative to its closest positioned ancestor. To horizontally center the tooltip relative to its containing element, we will set the left property to 50. Additionally, we will center the tooltip both horizontally and vertically by translating it -50% of its center of its own width and height. Finally, we will set the font weight to 600 and add padding of 10 px on all sides. Now that we're ready to start coding in JavaScript, the const keyword is used to declare a variable that cannot be reassigned later in the code. The document.querySelector method is a built-in JavaScript function that allows us to select an element from the HTML document. In this case, we're selecting the element with the class range slider. Similarly, the constant tooltip will be used to select the element with the tooltip class from the document object model. The following code snippet helps retrieve the highest value of a range slider input field and then assigns it to a constant variable called maxval. The parseInt function is used to convert the retrieved value into an integer data type. We will now create a function called slidePrice, which will be attached to the range input. This function will be triggered when the user scrolls the range input. To calculate the progress percentage of the range slider, we will create a variable called progress. This variable will use the current value of the range slider, which is retrieved using rangeSlider.value and divided by the maximum value of the range slider, which is stored in the variable maxval. The property tooltip.style.left determines the horizontal position of the tooltip with respect to its container element based on the progress value. By adding a percentage sign to the progress value, the tooltip's position is set as a percentage of its containing element's width. In this step, we will apply a linear gradient to style the background of the input range element. The gradient will be applied from left to right, with a shade of red-orange color at the beginning. The gradient will extend up to the progress percentage of the input range. After that, we will fill the remaining part of the gradient with a lighter color, which will continue until the end of the input range. So the gradient will start with a specific color, fill up to the progress percentage with that color, and then continue with a lighter color for the remaining percentage. To display the current value of the rangeSlide slider with a $sign prefix, the line $rangeSlide.value is used. The tooltip.innerHTML accesses the inner HTML content of the tooltip element, and this line sets its content. Therefore, the tooltip element will now show the current value of the range_slide slider with a $sign prefix. We have completed our slider price function, which sets the background for input range and tooltip content. Now we need to ensure that this function is executed when the page is first loaded. To achieve this, we will place our function within window.onload, which triggers when the page is fully loaded. We will specify the onInput attribute that triggers an event handler. It calls the slide price function every time the slider's value changes. So as you adjust the slider by dragging its handle, the slider price function will be automatically called. We have successfully created a range slider using JavaScript that provides a seamless user experience. You can find the original code for this project in the description. We appreciate your support and kindly request that you show it by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting on our content. Thank you for your time.